Good afternoon and welcome to WEP on Air. My name is Michelle Ponto and I'm from KAUST Communications. I'm here today with Nate Hagens. He's a professor from the University of Minnesota teaching a class called Reality 101, a survey of human predicament. Nate is a public intellectual who writes and speaks on the synthesis of human behavior, energy, economics, environment, and issues related to the human futures. Until recently, he was the lead editor of The Oil Drum, one of the most popular and highly respected websites for analysis and discussion of global energy supplies and the future implications of the energy decline. Welcome to our show today.
Thank you.
Thank you. So you're going to hear, those that are watching, if you hear a little buzz in the background, that's because we have our poster competition also going on today during our WEP on Air presentation. But it looks like everyone's having fun. We have a large number of people in our audience as well. So I'm going to talk, when I was reading about you and your class that you're teaching, Reality 101, a survey of the human predicament. It's not your average everyday university course.
No, it's not. I've spent about 15 years working on all these topics, and I've concluded that you have to understand bits of neuroscience, evolutionary psychology, energy, economy, money, environment, climate change, mass extinctions, human behavior, into a cohesive picture. Otherwise, you don't really understand the challenges that we face. And I also concluded that explaining these things to 50-year-olds with kids and mortgages and stresses, they don't have the cognitive bandwidth to understand them and to react, but 19-year-olds do. These concepts, you know, the times that we live in with what we face are really simple to explain. So it's pretty intense, but I love teaching that demographic. And the other aspect is, you know, we have 1,500 pages of reading during the semester. Other than my blood relative or people on the Post-Carbon Institute board of directors, who is going to read 1,500 pages of this stuff unless you have to take a college class? So it's a 15-week immersive experience, kind of 10 hours a week with 45 kids.
That is quite immersive. Usually it's a couple hours a week and that's
yeah.
it.
I'm a slave driver.
You're a slave driver. And you said that you said that the younger generation seems to be able to grasp it better than the older generation. Is that because they're not yet caught up in the complete human predicament?
Yeah, I think we all sense that something's not right. We look around in our Facebook feeds and we see the kind of the anxiety under the surface in any country that you could probably name. So 19-year-olds coming into my class, they're already aware that we're impacting the environment. They're already aware that there's a big amount of poverty and a wealth disparity, and there's now more bartenders and waitresses in the United States than there are manufacturing jobs. I mean, they kind of know these things, but they don't have a baby, they don't have a boss, they don't have a mortgage payment, they have free time to think about themselves, and we spend a whole month on the human brain, like where we came from, what we really need, what drives us, sexual selection, habituation, addiction, time bias, these aspects of our brain that are so relevant to our global situation, and they really like that. And then you have to think about, oh, who am I alive during this time? And then we learn about the rest of the situation.
Do you feel that the course changes them by the end?
I think I'll never know what impact it'll have until 10 or 20 years in the future, if ever. Probably about 10 or 15% of them are just really fired up and want to do something immediately. And another half of them probably are going to take this on board and make some changes in their life, and probably a third of them are like, thank you very much, I'm out of here. And that's to be understood, expected.
Do you think that, I'm just curious, just because, as like you said, right now they don't have children, they're accumulating their student loans, but they don't have to pay them yet. So the reality of a lot of the hardships that will come later on haven't hit them yet. Do you think that now that maybe they might be gung-ho and all positive about it, but when the human predicament does hit them, that they'll be like, uh-oh, he was right?
That's an excellent question. one of the main things I try to do is to have them train their own behaviors so that they're more flexible when events come, because we don't know exactly what's going to happen or when it's going to happen. More than likely, in the developed world, we're going to have to use less. We're going to have less access to energy, less affordability, so a lot of the gadgets and trips and those things are not going to be as prevalent as they are now. So for them to train their brains to value absolute wealth instead of relative wealth, because our brains as evolved organisms is we like to keep up with the Joneses. And if the guy next to us has a new boat and an extra house, then we want to have that too, otherwise we don't feel as successful. That's all a trap, because it doesn't make us happier, all those extra things. So for them at 19 to kind of have a conversation with themselves on what makes them happy and what is unnecessary is valuable, and I try to promote that.
Okay. Actually, I read that you had actually made that big choice yourself. You were making really good money in your previous job, gave it all away, now teaching university, or didn't give it all away, but
yeah, right.
Took a massive pay cut to do what you're doing now.
And eventually spent it all, which is effectively giving it all away. But yeah, I used to manage people's money on Wall Street, and we were investing in oil, and so I started reading about oil, and then I started realizing that, boy, oil is going to peak and decline in my lifetime. I started reading about externalities in our market system. We pay for just the goods, we don't pay for the pollution. That's externalized into the environment, into the commons. And that just seemed bizarre to me. So I gave all my clients their money back. I read on this stuff 3 or 4 years full time, got my PhD on these aspects, ecological economics. But I felt like I could be doing something better with my time than basically a high-paid used car salesman. It wasn't meaningful to me, and teaching these kids making less than 10% of what I used to make is very meaningful to me, because I get paid in things other than dollars. I get paid in neurotransmitters of, oh, I just impacted this young man's life somehow, and oh, she understood what I just conveyed. And this is a time where we face a giant collective action problem, where we will be better off if everyone cooperates, but if most people aren't going to cooperate, we would be better off not cooperating and just doing stuff for ourselves. But the more people that, if we can get a critical mass of 5 or 7 or 8% of people that are steadfast and actually are taking a pro-social, pro-future route, I think there can be some emergent transitions that are positive that can happen. So I'd like to get, these simple messages out. I mean, to get the full Monty, you have to go through 15 weeks of 10 hours a week in my course, but I'm trying to get these ideas spread more widely because, in my country and in yours, Canada, people aren't dumb, but they're ignorant of ecology and energy and the fundamental drivers of our economies. And I think if people understood those basics rather than just more money, more stuff, more toys, I think most people are good people. Most in this country, Saudi Arabia, everyone I've met from here has just been so warm and gracious. People are the same the world over. There's crazy people in every country, there's jerks in every country, but most people like to play with their dog, like good food, love their families, want to have a good life, want to do something to make the future better. And so we just need to kind of breathe life into that dynamic, I think.
Okay. You alluded a little earlier to the human predicament, but you didn't explain it fully exactly what that predicament is. Are we like the oil industry where we're going up and we're going to go down?
Define we.
Well, obviously you've been enlightened already, but maybe the rest of us
Yeah,
that are...
so our predicament, quite simply, is our economy is based on stocks of finite resources, but the leaders of our economy and the media treat it as if we were based on flows, as if we're living off the principle and we're telling ourselves we're living off the interest. So there's plenty of resources to have 10, 12 billion people. So it's not the number of people that's the problem, it's the number of people times the amount of consumption. And if all 7.5 billion of today's people want to live like Canadians or Americans, we don't remotely have that amount of resources. So if we talk about the total amount of consumption, the total amount of energy used by humans, yes, it's going to peak and decline, and probably relatively soon. Does that mean that the number of people or the satisfaction and meaning of our lives peaks and declines? No, because energy, after you've got your basic needs covered, more energy and more money doesn't bring you more happiness. But a lot of people in the world don't have their basic needs covered. So there's got to be kind of a convergence, to be fair. But we really don't need, I mean, a lot of what we do is we try to get these, okay, let me say it a different way. We're not evil. We're not trying to destroy the environment. We're not trying to be greedy. We're just executing the same neurotransmitter algorithms that our ancestors had. And what ends up happening is every day you go through your life trying to get these feelings of dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin. And a lot of those in our culture are correlated with energy use and material throughput. So it doesn't have to be that way, right? So the average American, and Canada is very similar, consumes 220,000 calories a day. Okay, our body consumes 3,000 or 2,500. We consume 80 times more than that with the lights and the airplanes and our footprint of our cars and all that stuff. So we could cut that in half easily and still have meaningful, productive lives. It's just that when we see everyone around us using that much, we don't want to cut back. But if everyone cut back, we'd complain and be nasty for a few weeks, and then we would adjust. There's plenty of examples of that. For example, Guatemala the average person in Guatemala makes $8,000 per year. The average person in Kuwait makes $78,000 per year, almost 10 times more. By all subjective well-being measures, they're equally happy and healthy in those two countries. It's just the social circumstances are different.
That's interesting on how, well, we are a very adaptable species, so it makes
Absolutely.
sense. Yeah.
Absolutely we are.
And I think that's what you meant when you said when it comes to an energy crisis, you said we're not facing a shortage of energy, but a long age of expectations.
Yeah, so imagine a high school girl who's dating the quarterback, and the high school quarterback dumps her. She's going to pine and be really upset and be obsessed and sad for months and months because she's focusing on what she misses, and without realizing the larger context is there's a whole nother future and a whole other world of opportunity, and probably 10 years from now the high school quarterback would be a jerk anyways. I mean, look at how much energy Americans use now, and look how miserable most people are. So I think the long age of expectations is we expect to consume more and more in the future, and when we're told that we're not going to be able to do that, we don't like that, to hear that, but there's really not an energy shortage. There's tons of energy left, but it's going to be costlier in energy, environment, and dollar terms to give it to the populations, so the benefits are going to decline. No more high school quarterback boyfriend sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So there's lots of energy, just not enough to maintain this type of living situation for billions.
So we
if
know,
that made sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. So we all kind of know that, as you said, we know that there's something wrong. We've been told for years we need to cut back, we need to reduce, we need to take better care of the earth, we need to be less wasteful, but we haven't done it.
Yeah.
Why haven't we done this?
Yeah, I think because you turn vegetarian and you recycle and you drive an electric car and you see very little other people doing that, and so you don't get we do things for social reasons. We do things to get social respect and status. So I think a lot more people would do those things if other people did. But I think we go through life trying to have the experiences we're used to every day, And a lot of the things that deal with conservation take either time or money or a little bit of inconvenience. And it takes discipline to get used to those things, just the same as you would start a training routine at a gym sort of thing. I don't think we're going to conserve to the necessary amounts until conservation is forced on us. And therefore, those people that are conserving now, ironically, they're doing it because they feel a fiduciary to the planet or whatever. But ironically, it's going to help them most because they're going to have trained themselves to live in a little bit different style, so that when that's forced on us, they're going to be more flexible and adaptive, and et cetera.
You mentioned that it needs to be, it might need to be forced on us. Who needs to, is it governments that need to be it? Is it marketing companies that need to start forcing this?
No, it's going to be reality that forces on us. 99.9% of people's day jobs, including governments, is to not have that happen, because we need to burn energy to grow the economies. So conservation of consumption is not what the governments are about. In Sweden right now, they have advertising campaigns so that people go on vacations and have sex because they need more babies, because their baby population is declining. And that's unacceptable in our current world. Why? Because we need babies that will buy diapers and toys and pay for school and et cetera. So I think that we're playing this game of leapfrog with more expensive energy, and then we print money in the global system, and then more expensive energy. And eventually we're going to have a disconnect where the financial system recalibrates with reality, and that will mean kind of the tide went out and we're going to have tougher times. And that, I think, is in the next decade.
Okay.
So that's what I meant by forced on us. It's not going to be forced by rules.
Yeah, it's just going to happen to us.
It's just going to happen.
Yeah. So 10 years isn't that long. So when this happens, as you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, your 19-year-olds really embrace the whole human predicament, but the older generations were a little bit, well, maybe they weren't ready to embrace it, or they're reluctant to. What's going to happen in 10 years
scared.
when this hits?
They're scared. I mean, the human predicament, as my course is called, but that's what you're referring to it as, is almost the perfect storm to fit our evolved brain and not react to it. It's complex, it's abstract, it's in the future, it's really scary, and people don't have an immediate thing to solve it. So all those things add up to either one of two things. Either someone will deny that it's real. We're going to go to Mars, technology is going to solve it, we're going to find a way, we're clever, we're going to use the oil in the Arctic. Many different forms of denial. Or we're screwed, it's too late. There's nothing we can do. And both of those forms, I call it denialism, denial and nihilism, are functionally equivalent to doing nothing, because they both obviate any responsibility for personal change. So what we need is people in the middle that aren't in denial and aren't giving up, but need to organize and get to work on these challenges. The problem is, of course, is that you're only getting hints of this risk from reading my stuff or watching some History Channel show or whatever. You're not actually seeing these things happen yet. They're only, they logically make sense that they will. So it's tough.
Do you think, because you talked about that, like new and different forms of energy, different kinds of things are going to eventually come. When they come, and say they are more efficient, say they do a little bit better for the earth or whatever they're going to do, do you think we're just going to fall into, they're like, okay, we did it, and we'll fall in that same over-consumerism pattern that they're already in?
Well, that's several questions. First of all, being more efficient and being better for the earth are two different things. So my view on renewables is they're mature, they're getting quite cheap, they're amazing, but any combination of renewables and fossil fuels will not continue growth. So renewables are great, and we could have a viable civilization built largely on renewables, just not this civilization. Your second question suggested that if we somehow found an unbelievably cheap energy source like nuclear fusion or something like that, some miracle energy source that we don't know of yet, but that does arrive, what would we do then? Personally, I don't think we're mature enough as a species to handle free energy, because what would happen is even if it was low carbon, we would blow through it on all kinds of other things and draw in non-energy limiters like lithium and water and trees and other species. And that's the other thing, that when all these discussions of energy and renewables don't often get brought up is the decimation of the natural world. And because we don't, sitting here in this studio, we can envision it, but we don't see it. But we've lost half of the animals on this planet since you and I were alive, as one example.
Yeah.
And we don't think about that, but to me, our stock markets are at all-time highs, but our real stock markets are crashing. And that's the thing that we don't take into account, is we need to value our nieces and nephews and cousins in nature. And that's not in our market system or our aspirations or even on the daily news. So I think that's very important.
It's what you're talking about. It's a little bit depressing in its own way, because
I know.
It's like the ones who are getting it are the few that take your class and read all those pages, and it's not even all of them. It's only 60% of them that you think that would actually go home with some takeaways with this. And then the rest of us, we're just going to wait for doomsday to happen and then hopefully adjust.
It's not doomsday, though. Doomsday would be a nuclear war. What I'm talking about is not doomsday. What I'm talking about is an overdue credit bill that we're going to have to shrink our economies by 30% and suck it up and cooperate and work hard and react. That's not doomsday. And I think that's the problem with the denialism, is people hear this story and they immediately go to the doomsday. It's not doomsday. I mean, if we drop in our countries where we're from 30%, we go back to 1993. If we go back 50%, we're to 1973. Now, all the countries in the world are going to be different. And I would say in some ways, some of the poorer countries are more set up to deal with these things. India has a meaningful percentage of their population still as farmers. So none of this stuff is really a big shock to them. America only has 3% of our population working in agriculture. So it's a big problem there. I think one of the advantages, and I haven't really thought about it, but my students go through this period of grief where they're a little shell-shocked. Holy crap, I'm alive during this time when all this is happening. I'm quite sad and a little bit scared. And then 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, they still are not happy about it, but they're no longer emotional about it. And a big part of that is because we have 24 kids in a room talking about this stuff, and they make friends outside of class. And when you're really stressed about something, even if you don't have an answer, to talk to someone about it is a very human response that reduces your cortisol and stress hormones. And so a lot of my students have already grieved about this future that they didn't know about, that this future is not going to happen, and it's going to be something different. So I think there's something to be said. Like, I first learned about this 20 years ago, and I've had various periods of like, oh, really? And I'm smiling now. I love going on hikes with my dogs. I have a great group of friends. This is in many ways an adventure. It just depends on your outlook. Mm-hmm. But I think it's very important to have a tribe and a network of people to process, like, what did this mean? What's going on? I don't, that sort of thing.
I think the tribe is very important because, as you mentioned, some of the skills that people may need in the future are not the ones that we're emphasizing right now. Everything now is tech and IoT, and we're not farming. We're not.
In the lobby here, they had a makerspace set up today. I mean, that's a great example. Why does everyone in my town need to have 2 chainsaws and 2 lawnmowers and a riding mower and all different sorts of skill saws and the tool kits? Everyone's got their own. Whereas if you have a building where people come and there's 1,000 different tools there that are loaned from someone, and then they can build anything they want. Examples like that where we don't have to have 300 million chainsaws purchased.
Oh, that makes sense. I'm going to open it up to the audience. If there's any questions?
Yes, we do have a question here from Simon online, who is asking if you can give us a little bit of insight as to what personal practices people should adopt to best safeguard the environment and reduce energy consumption.
Well, depending on where Simon lives, I would advocate a low-carb diet. I bike quite a lot. I still have a car, but I often bike. I think rather than specific behaviors, I think realizing that in the next 10 or 20 years, energy is going to get substantially more expensive, to arrange your life around not being disrupted by that is a big one. I think it's really easy to fall into the consensus trance that we hear on television and things like that, and I think it's healthy to think for yourself. I would tell Simon that think for himself, find people like him. Choosing his tribe is very important. I have a list of 47 recommendations in this book, and I think it's like a menu of options, because it depends. I would need to know more about his circumstances. The mere fact that he's listening to this conversation is already a point for him, in my opinion.
You mentioned when things are going to change, when it's going to happen to healthcare, because right now we do use healthcare in certain countries, in Canada and the U.S. for sure. We rely on healthcare a lot. Do we need to become more self-efficient, like you said, like make sure that we take care of our weight, make sure we exercise, make sure we...
Oh, absolutely, because most of us focus on financial capital, money. But money is really just a marker for real capital, which is social capital, human capital, our health, natural capital, the nature, and built capital, the building and this glass and things like that. So to invest in yourself, to invest in human capital is one of the best investments you can make. And I think being fit and taking care of your health is really important. Healthcare is one of those things at the bottom of the pyramid that one would hope is a basic essential need, with infrastructure and utilities and things like that would be focused on more than frivolous machines and toys. So I would assume that healthcare will continue to take priority in our economies. But in my country, it's totally messed up. Canada's in a much better spot. If I get sick, I'm going to come see you.
Come see. Well, that is what you just mentioned about healthcare and taking care of ourselves. I guess that is a positive of what the future could hold for us. So it's not all.
Oh, absolutely. Well,
there's lots of positives coming out of this.
There are. I mean, last month I took an Uber taxi and I saved myself an hour and a half and some money, and I ended up going to the airport and I was playing Words with Friends for a half hour on my phone. You know, it's like we have these time-saving devices and we save time and then just waste time. And so a lot of the things that we used to do manually, like chop wood, we now do with electric tools and chainsaws and things like that. And then we finish it and then we drive 10 miles to the health club. You know, there's these weird things that we would just do things manually the way we used to. See, that's the other problem with all this stuff, is our brains are being so incredibly hijacked. And I really worry about young people that are so addicted to social media and Twitter and Facebook and things like that, that they no longer have the attention span to plant a garden or to read a book even. They're so used to just immediate stimulation. So irrespective of any energy shortage or end of growth sort of things, is their biggest asset. I tell my students their number one biggest asset is not their resume, it's not their grade point average, it's not even their group of skills, it's their brain. And to keep the health of their brain and not be sucked into the vortex of continual habituation and social media and all that, because it's very unhealthy.
That's true. Is there another question?
Hi. I have so many questions about
Excellent.
everything you've said so far, but I'll try to keep it down. So I guess just one, and I will admit my knowledge of like energy and resources is not that great. I guess I'm a biologist in a sense. So I was just wondering if we have the ability to get resources for energy in another, like in space, do you think that one, we should, or and two, would it? Yeah, the first one, should we?
Depends what we would use it for. To continue to have a giant mining machine on Earth and just use it to get frivolous short-term dopamine, I would say no, we shouldn't. But I'll answer your second question for you. All those things are absolute crazy because of the cost. Because we have monetary lenses that we view the world in money. But we should view the world in low entropy energy and other natural resources. And there's a big cost that has to be deducted. There's a difference between the gross amount of energy and the net amount of energy that we receive. Kind of like when you get a job making $50,000 a year, you really only make $38,000 or whatever. Same thing with a lot of these space exploration things to go get. Now, mining an asteroid for minerals that we're really low on, I could see that being plausible. But these space mirrors and things like that are just kind of fantasy.
But okay. I guess just another question then. Do you think that, okay, so like you said that kids are being like inundated with like so much high stimulation, right?
Yes.
So like our brains evolutionarily are not ready for everything that's going around us right now, right? We are not actually like tuned to what we're used to. Or like, and so how do you think that companies should take advantage of that and then try to implement I guess like apps or activities that are healthy for your brain? Like, wouldn't that be a smart idea for a business?
Yeah, well, you asked a bunch of questions. Yes, it's called supernormal stimuli, where our brains get exposed to the same cues that our ancestors got, but they're 1,000 times stronger. And we didn't, that's why we prefer salty, sugary, fat food, because that was in short supply with our ancestors. So that's why kids love, at 14-year-olds, love Facebook and stuff, because they get likes. Likes means that their ancestors were respected in their tribe. The problem is the mechanism of that, dopamine, is the exact same that gets accentuated when you take cocaine. So we're basically giving cocaine to our teenagers. It's the exact same mechanism in the brain. So is it a wise idea for corporations to do something healthier? Only if it's demanded, only if the parents and the others demand it. But we like the supernormal stimuli things because they feel good. So far we haven't demanded those things because corporations aren't for the greater good. They are mini superorganisms trying to maximize one thing, their quarterly earnings. So they will respond to what is demanded.
I'm going to keep going.
No, keep going.
So, okay. Then do you think that there's a way to like essentially stop companies from being able to, because there's like a maximum for how much dopamine someone can produce in a certain amount of time, right? And so like, do you think there's like a way that we can encourage a healthier life besides just like the stereotypical like ads on TV of saying like, oh, you should do this, or like, I mean, and I know a lot of it's from like the home and like teaching kids how to be healthier in general, but like I would hope that there's a better way to get them the broader message across of like a balanced life in a sense of just like being able to, yeah.
I hope so too. I hope so too. No, you're right on topic. That is the topic actually, because we have to figure out a way to get these neurotransmitters that we're drawn towards with using less energy, with using less damage to the planet, but also making us feel good. And one of the strongest things for humans is social acceptance and approval. And so if there's really cool people doing that, I want to be like them. But as long as no one else is doing it, and so we're turning these kids, I hate to be so blunt, but I think it's quite accurate, into addicts. They're social media addicts, and then that actually is a gateway to all kinds of other behavior. Not all students. And when I say kids, I mean teenagers. So I don't have children, but if I did, I wouldn't allow them Facebook access till they were 16 or older even, because or very sporadically? It's a thorny question, right? Because all the schools have all these laptops and iPads and everything, and it's definitely impacting our brains.
I think it goes even beyond the iPads and the Facebook. I think we are almost addicted to, or some of us, our lifestyle. Like as you said, we go on fancy vacations. We always want more. There's always an excess, and it makes us feel good to be doing these things that we're doing. So we are addicted to that. So
yeah,
it would be very hard to
so
take us off our
there's
lifestyle
something
path.
called the hedonic ratchet, which it's like when you have a rental car, it says don't back up because you'll pop the tires on those things. It's like when we continue to consume at this high level of experience, we every year get a little bit more higher expectation of the future, and it's difficult to go back. Not just psychologically difficult, but physically difficult, with our neurons become habituated to these things. So I recommend to my students to reset their brains in nature a couple weeks a year with don't bring your phones along. I recommend periodic breaks from electricity and technology, like every Saturday, for example, or turn out the lights one night at home and just don't have anything to do with light, or use a candle, just not to save energy, not to save the planet, but to save their brain and to get into it's like exercise. It's like lifting weights for your brain.
Exactly. I mean, like, I feel like a lot of the issues in the world just boil down to people are not able to like slow down and understand what is actually good for themselves. I mean, like, okay, so like, I don't even know where to start. In terms of like companies getting more oil to get like business, like these guys are just, or guys and girls are just trying to gain more money for their company because it's the disease of more, right? There's always more. And so then like you'll try to, it doesn't matter what you're actually hurting in the process because it's,
yeah.
And so like it's like the balance of like understanding what you're doing and keeping it in balance with like the environment around you. Oh, there's so many.
Yeah, so I hope you come to my talk tonight at 5:30 because I'll mention some of this again. But to us, the wanting of something feels stronger to us than the having. So you think about buying this new car or this new pair of shoes or something, and you think about it for 2 weeks, and yes, I decided I'm going to go buy it. And you buy it and you're really happy, and then you show your friends and you wear your shoes, and after about a week or two the dopamine is totally gone, and you start thinking about what you want to buy next to replace that feeling. So I moved 7 years ago to where I live now, and I'm in a smaller house, and I have a 10-foot by 20-foot storage unit of all my stuff. I have not been in there in 4 years. All this stuff that I bought that was the great stuff in my life from at my old house, I haven't even walked in there. I'm paying $100 a month for this storage unit. It's all kinds of cool stuff. I swear, if everyone else was the same and I just had a tent and a backpack and a golden retriever and enough food, I would be happy. As long as everyone else kind of was in the same boat.
Exactly. I mean,
not in the middle of winter, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like it's like, it's so simple, but it's so hard. It's just everyone like lived a comfortable and happy, like calm life. Like there would just be no problems, right? I mean, like it's all just stemmed from like anxiety of like more. It's
yeah.
Like,
So you're way ahead of the game. You're way ahead of the game because you're asking these questions. And so the first thing is to just kind of have a conversation with yourself about what this all means, and you're gonna keep going.
Thank you.
No, not with questions, but
no,
just keep going in your life.
Yeah, I definitely
Is there another question?
Yes, we do. Yeah, we have one from Rashid online. I'm gonna read the question as he states it. So if people started saving resources and using less energy, what would they do with the resources or money saved? Wouldn't they also be used and indirectly cause the same or more damage? So for instance, if you switch to an electric car and save money by not paying for gas, petrol, wouldn't the saved money then be spent on energy exhaustive activities such as traveling?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I'm going to talk about that tonight. It gets to the concept called Jevons Paradox. Jevons was a 19th century economist who predicted that the steam engine, which was this amazing new invention, wouldn't save energy, but it would it would use a lot more energy. And he was right, because yes, it was way more efficient, but then a lot more people used it. It's called the rebound effect. So if we have a carbon tax for climate change and people stop using gasoline and they save $100 a month because of that, they're going to spend that $100 a month at Walmart or in a different way. And so there's indirect carbon that's in the products that we buy at Walmart. So there's a rebound there. There are ways around that, though. Both as an individual and as a country, you could establish some sort of a rule, either a social contract with yourself, or the government could have a policy that the benefits we get from this new technology invention, or the benefits we get from this more efficient process, we're not funneling those back into the regular economy. We're putting them towards this Plan B, more sustainable infrastructure future, and they're directed towards that rather than. So it's circumventing the dynamic that the question was asked about.
Okay, you mentioned a couple times the book. Can you tell our audience the name of the book in case they want to download
Yeah,
it?
it's not being published yet. It's 2 books that I've written for my students with my colleague DJ White, and it's called A Guide to Being Human in the 21st Century is the working title. Okay. And it's 1 page each on all the hundreds of aspects of this situation. This is a nonlinear story. It's very complex, but in my opinion, you have to understand the human brain, our psychology, our behavior. You have to understand the 6th mass extinction that's going on, and you really need to look at the world from an energy lens, not a money lens, to understand our situation.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
And for those of you who are interested, we will be live streaming his presentation today at 5:30. So tune in for more information and to learn a little bit more, or come by the lecture in the auditorium and watch him yourself. Thank you.
Thanks.